Across continents, governments today are being tested not just by their enemies, but by the weight of chaos itself. Chaos that reshapes authority, exposes fault lines, and forces leaders into defining moments. In Venezuela, a nation emerging from political rupture and foreign pressure, acting President Delcy Rodriguez is pushing back against Washington's influence, insisting that sovereignty and internal cohesion must guide the country's fragile transition. Meanwhile, in Israel, a state at war and under constant security threat, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is confronting national grief and hard questions following the recovery of the body of the last Israeli hostage held in Gaza, a moment that has deepened calls for unity, accountability, and resolve. Well, these are not the same struggles, nor are they born of the same causes, yet both reveal how instability, whether political or security-driven, can strain governance, harden decisions, and redefine leadership under pressure. When a nation is pushed to its limits, how does leadership respond? With defiance, with force, or with reform? And in moments of chaos, what ultimately holds a state together? Is it power, unity, or is it trust? Welcome to today's Flash News. I am Star Smart and we'll be right back. Acting President Delcy Rodriguez has publicly declared that Venezuela has had enough of Washington's directives as she seeks to steer the country through one of its most turbulent transitions in history.
Por eso es importante que abramos los espacios para la divergencia democrática, pero que sea la política con P mayúscula y con V de Venezuela. Ya basta de las órdenes de Washington sobre políticos en Venezuela. Que sea la política venezolana quien resuelva nuestra divergencia y nuestros conflictos internos. Ya basta de potencias extranjeras. Le ha costado muy caro a esta república tener que encarar las consecuencias del fascismo, del extremismo en nuestro país.
Well, her defiant remarks came days after more than 100 political prisoners were freed, part of broader efforts to stabilize Venezuela in the chaotic aftermath of the United States capture of former leader Nicolas Maduro on January 3rd, 2026. Now, speaking to oil workers at a state-owned refinery, Rodriguez insisted that Venezuelan political disputes should be resolved internally, not under foreign pressure. She rejected ongoing United States interference, saying that handling national issues domestically is essential for dignity and honor.
Que sea la política con P mayúscula y con V de Venezuela. Ya basta de las órdenes de Washington sobre políticos en Venezuela. Que sea la política venezolana quien resuelva nuestra divergencia y nuestros conflictos internos. Ya basta de potencias extranjeras. Le ha costado muy caro a esta república tener que encarar las consecuencias del fascismo, del extremismo en nuestro país.
This stance highlights the tightrope that she has to now walk. Asserting Venezuelan sovereignty while also managing the realities of U.S. diplomatic, economic, and security influence since Maduro's ouster. The implications are vast. A more confrontational Venezuelan leadership could deepen diplomatic rifts, affect global oil markets, and reshape regional geopolitics, as Caracas repositions itself amongst powers like China, Russia, and Cuba. And domestically, this rhetoric may serve to unite supporters who fear chaos, but also risk alienating sectors seeking stability through cooperation. Now, should Venezuela look outward for guidance, or should it forge its own path amidst lingering international tensions? Is what we'll get to see in the coming days. But for now, over to Israel. We see Israel has agreed to a limited reopening of the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt, signaling a potential but partial easing of the humanitarian crisis in the besieged Palestinian territory. The reopening exclusively for pedestrian passage is tied to Israel's condition that it first recover the remains of the final hostage held in Gaza, which is a key term in the broader truth framework as unveiled by President Donald Trump last October. Now, recent information online shows Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressing the Knesset in a solemn and emotionally charged session following the recovery of the body of Ran Vili, the last remaining Israeli hostage held in the Gaza Strip.
אתה מנהיג ייחודי. יש לך זיקה למדינת ישראל ייחודית, אבל באמת מה שפחות מכירים, וציין זאת היושב ראש, זה כישרון הציור שלך. ציירת בעצמך.
The president in his address, Netanyahu, the prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, acknowledged the deep national grief surrounding the loss, describing the moment as a painful chapter in Israel's ongoing conflict. He also paid tribute to Vili, a police officer, and extended condolences to his family, emphasizing the heavy cost borne by Israeli society. The prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, went on to provide updates on Israel's security and military operations in Gaza, reaffirming that the campaign remains focused on dismantling militant infrastructure and preventing future attacks. He stressed that Israel's actions are guided by security imperatives while insisting that the mission is not yet complete. Benjamin Netanyahu also announced plans for official investigations into the circumstances surrounding the hostage situation, signaling a government review of intelligence, operational decisions, and crisis handling. He said lessons will be drawn to prevent similar outcomes in the future. Addressing growing public pressure and political divisions, Benjamin Netanyahu called for national unity, urging Israelis to stand together during what he described as a decisive and difficult period. He highlighted the importance of public safety, resilience, and trust in state institutions. Well, the speech concluded with references to future policy measures as the government prepares for the next phase of security planning amid continued regional uncertainty.
ברוך בואכם למדינת ישראל שמחבקת אתכם אל ליבה. תודה רבה לכם.
Well, since Israeli forces took control of Rafah during the long-running war, this vital border point has remained shut, limiting the flow of food, medicine, and aid into Gaza's civilian population. But then the United States envoys pressed Israeli officials this week to reopen the crossing during talks in Jerusalem, showing international pressure is still in play. Now, opening Rafah alone for foot traffic underscores how fragile ceasefire arrangements remain. For Palestinians, the move may bring a small relief, but it falls short of restoring the lifeline that sustained Gaza's economy and humanitarian support before the conflict. But then we see this as one of two things, either a cautious reopening, a genuine step towards peace, or another bureaucratic hurdle in a long road to lasting calm. Over to the United States, we see national debates over immigration enforcement, which has reached its fever pitch after federal agents fatally shot Alex Pretty, who was a 37-year-old ICU nurse in Minneapolis, the second such deadly incident in the city in less than 3 weeks. Federal authorities claim Pretty was armed and posing a threat, but video footage circulating online and verified by multiple outlets show him not drawing a weapon and being tackled with force before the shots were fired. The deaths have provoked widespread anger, and as a matter of fact, it has also provoked protests from local leaders demanding state-led investigations to the United States president, warning that core American values are at stake. Across dozens of cities, demonstrations have erupted with citizens calling for accountability and an end to aggressive federal immigration actions. Minnesota's Governor Tim Walz made the statements directed to the federal government. Let's take a look at bits of it.
Donald Trump, I call on you once again. Remove this force from Minnesota. They are sowing chaos and violence. We've seen deadly violence from federal agents again and again and again. But in contrast to that, on these frozen streets, what you witnessed yesterday was the best of Minnesotans, peacefully exercising their First Amendment rights. And I attended in the church basement hundreds of Minnesotans from all faith packing care packages for families that have been ripped apart. Despite the horrific acts by this federal government, Minnesotans are standing up for the rule of law. They're protesting loudly and urgently, but peacefully. It must stay that way, Minnesota.
Well, President Donald Trump publicly blamed Democratic chaos for the deaths of Pretty, an earlier victim, Renee Good, as protests and political pressures intensified. Well, so far, this sadly has been the reaction of the United States Border Patrol commander to the tragic incident. Let's take a listen to Greg Bovino.
Immigration mission continues unabated here in Minneapolis, despite yesterday's tragedy that was preventable by folks making better choices, politicians, journalists, and would-be anarchists and rioters.
Well, the conflict raises complex questions about public safety, civil liberties, and federal versus local jurisdiction. With Congress facing calls to re-examine Department of Homeland Security policies and potential legislative reforms, one must ask, can the United States balance border security with respect for civil rights, or will these clashes continue to deepen national divides? While the European Union on another part of the world has launched a comprehensive investigation into Elon Musk's AI chatbot, Grok, which was hosted on the X platform after global uproar over its ability to generate sexually explicit images, including those potentially involving minors of real people. Now, this probe conducted under the EU's stringent Digital Services Act aims to determine whether X failed to properly identify and mitigate the risk posed by Grok's image generation features. Regulators describe the alleged content as potentially amounting to illegal material, particularly non-consensual sexual deepfakes that degrade women and children. And they're examining whether X has complied with its duties to protect users across the bloc. X has responded with assurances of zero tolerance for exploitative content and updated rules restricting certain imagery, but critics say these measures may be too limited and, of course, too late. This investigation could set a major precedent for how powerful AI tools are regulated globally, especially as generative models become increasingly accessible. If X is found in violation, the EU could impose fines of up to 6% of global revenue and force significant changes to AI safety practices. With technology reshaping online spaces daily, it begs the question, how do we harness AI's benefits without letting innovation erode fundamental rights and protections? And beyond government and battlefields, today's headlines remind us that power itself is evolving. From politics to war and now to technology, authority is increasingly concentrated and increasingly scrutinized. The European Union's action and investigation into Elon Musk's Grok chatbot highlights a new frontier where innovation moves faster than regulation and where ethical boundaries are still being drawn. Well, as artificial intelligence reshapes communication, influence, and truth itself, the question facing the world is no longer just who governs nations, but who governs the tools that shape public reality. In an age where chaos can spread through politics, conflict, or code, the challenge remains the same. How do societies protect human dignity, accountability, and order without sacrificing freedom? Well, I am Star Smart, and this has been Flash News. Coming up next is Undaunted, ABC Amba News. Do stay tuned.